Arturo Lopez Levy worked as a political analyst for the Cuban government before coming to America in 2001. He joins us now via Skype from Texas. You saw the story, some raw emotions there. Some of these Cuban Americans going back to Cuba for the first time. Talk to me about the significance of this cruise.
Mike, this is very important. It is a historic landmark. There used to be ferry boats between Havana and Key West and Miami before Castro's revolution. And I would say in the first 2 years, 1959, 1960, a little after, at the beginning of 1961. But since that time, when the Beatles has not even come to America, there were no cruisers, no boats, commercial boats coming between the United States and Cuba. And now Carnival, the cruise company, is inaugurating a service that every other week, more than 700 travelers will go to Cuba. And this is very well received in Cuba, and it is something that will push for the economic reform that is taking place in the island.
The cruise almost didn't happen, though. There was this lawsuit. Cuba actually reversed course, let the Cuban-born onto the cruise. That was important as well. Can you talk to me about the improving Cuba-U.S. relationship and kind of this dance that's still underway?
It was very important that Secretary Kerry, in his visit to Miami some weeks ago, he made the case and say that Cuba should live by international standards. In American law, to discriminate Cuban-born individuals from getting into these cruisers would be discrimination, plain and simple. By this type of policy of engagement, of rapprochement, the Obama administration has demonstrated that they have been more successful than 50 or 55 years of hostility. This policy of change by rapprochement has proved in a specific this case that it is working. The Cuban government changed its policy out of concern and a kind of dialogue with Carnival Cruise, and also as part of a dialogue with the American government, and also, last but not least, the type of dialogue that the new reality creates in Cuba.
Talk to me about, while we saw the people rejoicing when the ship arrived in Cuba, that was not the case in Miami when it left. There were some protesters out there when it set sail. Obviously, tourism, people-to-people exchanges will continue with the thaw, but how much is politics still involved in all of this, do you think?
There is a lot of politics, Mike, and it has a lot to do with the fact that the embargo is still in place, and the travel prohibition is still in place. It's the law of the land in the United States. There is a very vocal minority in Miami. Already 90% of the Cuban in the island support better relations between Cuba and the United States, and close to 65 in Miami support this course. But there is a very hardcore of the Cuban exile that is very hostile to this development. It is a kind of ironical. More than 700 Americans will travel to Cuba every other week. They are going to be received in the way you just see, Mike, with dance, with salsa. People will be dancing there, drinking mojitos. They might go to the beaches. They walk by Old Havana. But we cannot call any of them tourists, because tourist travel to Cuba is forbidden. So it is obvious that people realize that this is very ironical, very hypocritical. Americans should go and travel everywhere. This is what Secretary Kerry said in Miami. It should be a right. But Congress has a role to play in this game, because the law of the country is that it is forbidden to go to Cuba. So let's see how this goes.
Arturo, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us from Texas.